Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I am John Webster.
And I'm Mark Hamilton. We want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
On today's show, we will be covering the top 10 ways to avoid becoming an atheist.
But first, we want to tell you about the show's sponsors.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meetup is at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
The Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings of the month are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday, we hold the Skeptics Book Club. On the fourth Sunday, we're mixing it up. Sometimes we have a get-together we call a Reflections Meeting. It features potluck in someone's home, and sometimes we'll play board games or similar activities, and now and then we have a blood drive too.
Later in the show, we will give you our websites to visit for additional details, including times and locations. We have some news on which to comment.
The violent events that happened in Paris, France, well, there were violent events in more than just in Paris, but it was the most reported on in the news this week. Also in the news was this response by a man in Paris. Towing a piano behind a bicycle, he visited one of the scenes of violence and without saying a word played John Lennon's Imagine.
We will bring you the words.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today.
Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace.
You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one.
Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world.
And you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
I believe in John Lennon's future.
I believe in it too. I think that the lyrics are just as relevant today as they were when he sang them, and especially in the context of what happened over the past week. It's clear that some people they aren't believing this way. They're so tied up in religion and the ideology that they've subscribed to. And it's such a shame. They're not thinking of other people. They're not thinking how connected we are and how we're all here sharing this space and the ways that we're impacting each other. And it's so sad that they can't see just how damaging it is. And So I believe in it too.
It's religious extremism.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you get that.
Well, getting to the main program today, speaking for Americans, 70% of Americans believe in God. And so it's clear that many of them would frown upon the rejection of the belief in God, that there's clearly a disadvantage to not believing in God, may be dangerous. And so today on Freethought Forum, we thought we'd help out our fellow Americans by giving the top 10 ways that you can avoid becoming an atheist. And this is a list authored by John. Now, you've written some books. Is this a list that you've published in books, or was it?
This was actually first published to a outlet I used to write for called the Modesto Atheism Examiner.
Okay, all right. So it's published online, and I think we're going to start at number 10 and just count down the ways and elaborate here and there on the different topics. And hopefully everyone can pay attention and avoid use this to help them avoid becoming an atheist. Maybe that's a worthwhile pursuit for some people. So
This is a how-to guide on how to avoid becoming an atheist. This is actually a more or less satirical article I wrote. And when I wrote it, I didn't even intend for it to be satirical. But apparently, since I've written satire for the past 2 or 3 years, it ended up being satirical anyway, because apparently that's how I write. And I wrote it, and I wasn't really thinking that it would necessarily do well, or at least do any better than any of my other articles. But it turns out that in 3 days, it received over 17,000 views on social media, and it was shared by Atheist's Friendly Atheist, and by Global Secular Humanism Movement, or Global Secular Humanist Movement. And I was thankful for both shares, and I was thankful for the other hundreds of shares that I received from people after I posted it on social media. So here we go.
well, I mean, a list like this where we'll definitively state the top 10 ways you can avoid becoming an atheist. You may agree, you may disagree. We want to remind everyone that you can call in live to the show and state your opinion. The number is 865-215-2288. We'll be glad to take your call live on the air here as we go through. We'd rather talk to you than each other. This is a show for everyone watching, and we'd like to know.
I don't mind talking to him. I'm fine talking to him.
I appreciate that, John. Well, let's get started. Let's go to number 10.
Number 10, don't go to college. Book learning is for sinners.
So don't go to college. The first way to avoid becoming an atheist. Is this based on your personal experience, or?
This is actually based on personal experience. When I went to college, I actually went to a Southern Baptist college that was so conservative they kicked out one of my fellow students for being gay. And when I started going to college, I was actually Christian. And by the time I got done with college, I was having doubts, and it ended up it ended up with me reading the Bible cover to cover, which resulted in me becoming an atheist. But the seeds of doubt were planted while I was in college through several instances, and I'll get into those instances later on in the rest of the top 10 list. But I'd like to read something that I came across, and it's called "Why Are Educated People More Likely to Be Atheists?" And this is not something I wrote. This is actually something that I found online, but I think it supports my point of how college might turn you into an atheist. The article goes, "The more education a person receives, the more likely they are to become atheists. Non-belief also increases with intelligence and income. Residents of more educated countries see religion as less important in their daily lives. Why are highly educated people more likely to be atheists? There are two categories of explanation. Either religious people lack capacity for skepticism, or they choose to make a blind leap of faith and subscribe to the belief system adopted by the religious community. If religion is essentially a mechanism for dealing with unpleasant emotions, it is most useful when life is most difficult, as in disease-ravaged, poverty-stricken sub-Saharan Africa, and least useful when the quality of life is good, as is true of godless Europe. In less educated countries, the general standard of living is poor. There is a lot of chronic illness and early death. Infant and child mortality are high. The population is highly vulnerable to droughts, famines, and natural disasters. Most people find it miserably difficult to make a living. Governments are weak and corrupt, and ordinary people get pushed around by gangsters and warlords. Of course, there may also be little religious freedom, so that if there are any agnostics, they are forced to keep a low profile. Lacking any objective solution for their many problems, residents of less developed countries turn to religion for answers. The clearest evidence for this is the fact that in poor countries where the standard of living is low, virtually everyone sees religion as important in their lives. As the standard of living improves, there are fewer unpleasant situations over which people have no control, and therefore less of a market for religion. With improving quality of life in developed countries, the importance of religion declines. Looking into the future, this predicts a gradual shrinking of religious beliefs as the standards of living around the globe continues to improve, fueled by rapid economic development."
I could speak for myself because it's a pretty big generalization to assume that less developed, less educated, and less wealthy people are more prone to believe in God or find those beliefs more useful. But for myself, when I was less educated, when I had less perspective, then I found things like God and the religion I was in easier to believe in and seemingly holding more importance. And so the more I did learn and the more perspective I gained and the more people I met and the more you kind of understand how the world all fits together in what I would call actual reality, the less these beliefs kind of hold up. And so I would agree 100%. Don't go to college unless you want to maybe slide down the slippery slope into becoming an atheist.
Yeah. And another point I'd like to make is that in Scandinavian countries, where the standard of living is higher and they actually provide free education to their citizens, religiosity goes down. And one of the reasons for this is because they are not living in miserable conditions, and they are, like I said, more educated. And the more educated people are, and the happier they are, the less they tend to seek out religion. Because as I'm prone to say, most people come to religion after they've had a really bad day, or either have been emotionally manipulated to go to religion and adhere to religion.
Well, let's move on to point number 9. If let's say you go ahead and go to college and somehow you're able to hold firm in your belief to God and your religion. So if you do go to college, the number 9 way to avoid becoming an atheist, well, don't take an introduction to a philosophy course.
Yep. Number 9 is, if you do go to college, do not take an introduction philosophy course. And I have in quotes here, I can't believe you're asking me to prove the existence of my God. That's Kant with a K, K-A-N-T, as in the philosopher Kant. Another piece of information I have here is an article posted by Sean Carroll online on April 29, 2013. And the article asks, what do philosophers believe? And according to a study, among philosophers who don't specifically specialize in religion, the percentage of atheists is pretty overwhelming. Turns out that 71.1% of those surveyed said that they are an atheist, and 18.4% of them said they were religious. So in other words, 71% of them don't believe in a personal God or are not religious, and 18.4% of people are religious.
Well, so why do you think specifically philosophy is dangerous to this belief in God?
I would actually say that one of the reasons is philosophy relies on heavy thinking. And there's a lot of introspection and analysis and critical thinking done when you become a philosopher, or when you do philosophy. And it's interesting with the apologists that I've talked to. Many apologists who are basically people who study the defense of the Christian faith say that you need philosophy to understand God. And here's the problem I have with that, okay? According to the Bible, God is a conscious being that is all-powerful, that wants everybody to know he exists so bad that if they don't believe he exists, he sends them to hell to be tortured for all of eternity. And if they do believe he exists, he rewards them with eternal bliss. And many presuppositional Christian apologetics philosophers, and that would be the 18% who do believe in a personal God, say that you need philosophy to understand God, or to know the nature of God, or to understand Christianity. And I say, if you need a master's degree in presuppositional apologetics, and God is using you to make the case for his existence, it is possible and highly likely that this God doesn't exist. Because if there was a God that was all-powerful and wanted everybody to know he exists, he would not need other people to prove his existence for him. He would prove his existence himself. We have several instances in the Bible of God actually doing things. God created the universe in 6 days. God spoke to Adam, Eve, Cain, Balaam, Noah. God sent an angel to Mary to let her know that she was with child. And if God is relying on other people to, or as the case is made, or as the claim is made, that God is relying on other people to do his, proving his existence before him, it's highly likely that this God doesn't exist.
I would agree. We've got a caller on the line, John, so let's go ahead and take this call. Caller, thank you for calling the Freethought Forum. What's your name?
This is Charles from Central Illinois.
Charles from Central Illinois?
Yes.
All right, thanks for
I'm a
calling.
frequent caller.
Oh, a frequent caller. Well, thanks for calling again. We're happy to speak with you. What are you calling in about?
Today's subject, top 10 ways to keep from being an atheist.
Right.
Now, you discovered not going to college and philosophy and studying philosophy.
Correct. Correct.
Let's make sure that we can define terms properly. So, would you give a proper definition out on philosophy and why studying it is so bad on the religiosity of people? Because
Okay.
the definition would be the important part.
Okay, that's fine. I can actually do that. Bertrand Russell once said that philosophy is the study of things we do not know, as in the study of gray areas where there is hot debate over things existing or the way things are. So the definition of philosophy, at least according to Bertrand Russell, who is arguably one of the most well-known philosophers out there, is the study of things we do not know, and the study of things about which there are gray areas or hot debate over.
Agreed. Now, one of the things I've noted about philosophy is that when you study certain subjects, you'll study that what is proclaimed as right and proper actions in, say, like, okay, the holy books, the Quran, the Bible, the or however it's pronounced, versus how the priesthood actually acts, seems to have a very, very big difference there. Because if you actually read the Bible, you'll discover that a lot of or the Quran or so forth, that a lot of the people that are, quote, the leaders, aren't doing what the Bible or Quran or what have you is proclaiming that they should be doing.
You're right, and as the saying goes, when properly read, the Bible is one of the most effective ways of becoming an atheist.
Mark Twain.
Was that who said that?
Yep.
Awesome. Glad you know that.
Well, I think we were covering the thought that you would think that the agents of God, the officials of these religions, the clergy, authorities in the religion, I think you're kind of touching on that thought that if God was depending on these people to make it known that He is this all-powerful Creator and that He is present, that He exists, that it's clearly. Even though I'd say the majority of people believe in God, I would say it's failing to do an adequate job of portraying the kind of being that He is, the kind of God that He is, what He actually wants people to do, and how He actually wants them to behave, as represented by the officials and by clergy and such, and by the true believers. I would say these people we're supposed to be holding up as role models just aren't doing a good job, and I think a lot of apologetics would say this is evidence of our imperfection. You can only expect so much from man. Well, then I would also question, why is God choosing them to be His agents? So yeah, well, and then if you're going to jump on the idea that, well, if we just purely somehow were able to distill life to just Bible principles, does that solve our problem? If we take man out of the equation and just go by what the Bible says, does that prove an existence of God, or does it prove anything is especially divine or inspired by a grand Creator?
Exactly. And
So we'll be talking more about
another thing I like to point out is that in most cases in the Bible where God speaks to a leader of God's people, such as Moses, he spoke to Moses through a burning bush. So that is that's an instance where God is actually speaking to people. And if he can do that, why can't he speak to people in a way that's detectable, that we can have somebody record with audio recording devices or video recording devices, since we have them today. And another thing is that in the Bible, when God gave Moses the Ten Commandments, Moses went up on a high mountain away from everybody else to get the Ten Commandments. That should give reason for you to be skeptical right there, because why is Moses having to go away from God's people to get the Ten Commandments? Why didn't God give the Ten Commandments to Moses in front of everybody?
Right.
That would be more believable, rather than Moses hiding somewhere and going off by himself to have this revelation.
We'd be skeptical today if someone said they were only receiving personal transmissions from God when they're in a special room or up on a mountain somewhere, and they were only able to communicate it to us. Yeah, I think we all agree that the people speaking for God in the modern world are doing a bad job of it. So why doesn't he just speak for himself?
Exactly.
One of the things I like to continually point out is that the varying inconsistencies in all the stories is, like, say, the so-called New Testament, or as I call it, the Second Testament. For instance, Saul of Tarsus, I think it's pronounced, otherwise known as St. Paul, in Chronicles, First Chronicles, said that the Lord and God, Jesus, will return soon. But in the Second Chronicles, he says, you are to know anybody who makes any such statement, because they are false, even himself. So how come this super supreme being, who gave him, essentially speaking, absolute divine knowledge in a download, like he was some kind of iPhone getting an application, screws up his own divine download, his own divine message.
Yeah, and if it was somehow misinterpreted or mistranslated at some point, surely the all-knowing, all-powerful Creator it's completely within his power to issue a correction, you would think, or a patch.
Or he would never have allowed it in the first place.
Sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Another thing I like to point out is that when it came to the Bible, it took God apparently 1,500 years to get the Bible written. The first book of Job, the first book written was Job, and that occurred thousands of years ago, and it took God 1,500 years to write the entire book. When it came
then he had to use 70 separate scribes.
Yep.
To get it all assembled at one over a course of several years.
The
Septennium.
Yep.
As they were called. That's for the First Testament, the Old Testament.
Yep.
Why couldn't he have just, have one of the heavenly hosts drop it off in front of everybody during one of the high holy days?
Exactly. Yep. What was it, 70 or 40?
Well, when I looked it up, it said 70.
70? Okay, I thought it was 40, but I could be wrong. But another thing is that according to the Bible, God didn't dictate the Bible. Apparently, God is this all-powerful, all-wise, all-knowing being, and he didn't dictate the Bible. There are 40 different, clearly different writing styles in the Bible, some of which are very good writing styles, and some of which are very poor writing styles. One of the poor writing styles in the Bible is in Genesis, which it gives the chronology of the begats and so forth. And one of the ways that the begats ends is when it's talking about Adam, and it says, and Adam lived 900 years, and he died. Why is the words "and he died" necessary? Those are extraneous, superfluous, unnecessary words because, according to the Bible, of course, everybody died except for Enoch, who went to heaven. And honestly, the words "and he died" being added to the story about somebody's life or how they lived and died honestly sounds like something a 6-year-old would tell his best friend when he's talking about how his pet goldfish bit the dust.
Well, Charles,
one of my favorite things about that whole long life things is a lot of those very long-lived guys were still around when their great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandchildren were dying on them because they were only living for like 200 to 300 years. And, they didn't even ever notice that their descendants were dying off faster than they were.
yeah, there's all kinds of inconsistencies and illogical passages, and it's okay to hold the Bible to a high standard, and we're being fair to expect a lot from the Bible, from God's Word. Apparently his only living record of all the things that he's done and things that have happened. So Charles, we're gonna let you go for it now. We appreciate you calling in.
Thank you for calling, man.
Yeah, you may enjoy coming up. We will dig deeper into the Bible, and one of the ways you can avoid becoming an atheist is also not to think too hard about the religion that you are a part of. So
Yep. Number 8, if you do stumble and are the least bit skeptical at all, find yourself a good Bible-believing church and get back to associating with like-minded Christians right away. It may seem like an intellectually dishonest and insecure thing to do at first, but yeah, you know what? It totally is.
So, education, good way to become an atheist, becoming more educated, thinking critically, be a good way to also descend into atheism further. And then if you do encounter beliefs that don't quite line up with your view of the world or what you think God would do or how he behaves or things like that, you want to pull back. You want to isolate yourself further into these beliefs, put yourself back in the bubble, make sure that you're only going to be around people that are going to reinforce these ideas, even if you do question and are skeptical.
Yep. One way to find out if you're wrong about something and to discover the truth is to expose yourself to people who disagree with you. So if somebody disagrees with you, you should actually seek them out and find out if what you believe is wrong. Christopher Hitchens was once on Sean Hannity's show, and after something Sean Hannity said, Christopher Hitchens remarked, you seem to be of the persuasion, or it seems to be the case, that you have never read anything that is the opposite viewpoint of what you believe. And it is always a good idea when coming to a conclusion about something or trying to decide what is the truth to do some research on not only positions you agree with, but also the positions that are out there that do not disagree with you to find out if you may be wrong.
Yeah, I enjoy challenging my own thoughts and ideas, and a lot of times you'll find yourself either forming a more well-rounded opinion, or you might find that you were wrong, and that's okay. You can readjust and recalibrate according to more knowledge and more perspective. Yeah, I totally appreciate this. And I think it's fun to kind of look at an argument that you won't agree with right off the bat and see, hey, let them lay it out. Does this make sense? Is this something that happened that you experienced when you were kind of finding your way to atheism or out of religion?
Actually, the first time that I met an atheist, there was no real conversation as far as me asking him why he was an atheist. He didn't necessarily tell me why he was an atheist. He just told me he was an atheist. And of course, I thought that, this was back when I was a Christian, and I thought that, he was, this bad person, and he didn't have morals, and he couldn't know right from wrong. And, I was just, I was in the dark as far as, knowing what actual atheists believe. Many people who, many atheists are viewed as worshiping the devil, which is the furthest thing from the truth. We actually don't believe in the devil. I would say to Christians that, if they think the atheists worship the devil, that you believe in the devil, why don't you worship him? One encounter I had with a coworker a while back was after I told her I was an atheist, she thought that being an atheist meant you worship the devil. So she thought that I worshiped the devil, and she seemed to be completely fine with this. And when I pointed out to her that I didn't believe the devil exists, I didn't believe the devil exists, I didn't believe that God exists, I don't believe that heaven or hell exists, she seemed to be more disturbed by the fact that I didn't believe in heaven or hell or God or Satan, rather than if I worshiped the devil. So she seemed to be more okay, and it seemed to be to her to be more socially acceptable to worship the devil rather than not to believe in God, heaven, hell, or Satan.
Well, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Doesn't make any sense, does it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. When you actually, if you talk to an atheist, I think going back to Imagine, these very simple ideas laid out in this song are the core of what we believe. Or I'll speak for myself and the atheists I've spoken to believe that we shouldn't be looking for the differences and causing strife among each other. Whereas if you're going to subscribe to a religion, there's a good side and a bad side. You got to pick one, and everyone else is going to go to hell. And that's quite a way to look at things. And it's interesting that it's like some people are so fixated on picking a side that you can't just not believe. It's got to be God or Satan. And well, I just don't think that makes a lot of sense at all. And how is that helpful? How is that helpful to live in the modern world? Is to assume that there's these deities that we have to have an allegiance to, that you have to, whether you like it or not, or believe it or not.
As Christopher Hitchens said, a celestial North Korea.
Well, how about how do you feel about moving on to number 7?
Okay. Number 7. Remember, God knows all and sees all. So if you have even the slightest doubt about your faith, he will find out about it and you'll burn for it, which is kind of creepy, sadistic, and unnecessarily intrusive if you think about it. Sort of reminds me of Big Brother in George Orwell's 1984.
Yeah, I think it kind of leads from number 8 there into number 7. This idea that these ideas are so fragile that you just shouldn't consider that they're you can't challenge them. You shouldn't consider they're not true, and that it's so dangerous. It's so fragile that if you do start just considering that it's not true, that you're risking eternal damnation. Really, is this how I felt when I was questioning my faith? Is that how you felt?
It is.
It
is.
It seems very scary and dangerous.
Yeah, dangerous ideas, and that's how believers characterize doubts, as dangerous ideas. You don't want to go there. Just reinforce those beliefs and be around people who believe what you believe, and talk about how wonderful it is to be a Christian.
I think even go back to some of the earlier points where if you start thinking. It seems like critical thinking is a bad word in religion among religious people, because you're starting to put your faith in your own intelligence and your own ability to reason. And well, if you're talking yourself into religion, I guess that's a good thing. But if you're talking yourself out of religion, it becomes a bad thing. You shouldn't be thinking for yourself. You shouldn't be feeling superior to God, that you're smarter than He is, or you should be. Maintain ignorance and not put faith in your own brain. I know a lot of the religious people I've talked to and debated these topics with seem to think that scientists, capital S, just think they're the greatest thing ever, and that's why they don't want to believe in God, because they think they're the smartest, and they want to believe in anything greater, that they're not humble, that they're arrogant, and. I think when I started adopting atheistic beliefs, I found it humbling. I didn't find myself thinking I was better than other people, superior, that I was greater than the creator of the universe. A lot of it's thinking about ways, and I felt pretty insignificant and very powerless, But I found it less scary to believe that we're at the mercy of coincidence and chance than we are at the hands of a vengeful, wrathful God who will burn us for thinking a certain thing, or not wholeheartedly believing in a religion that we have questions about, serious questions and good questions about.
Yep, as the saying goes, the universe is not created with human mind. It's a very humbling experience. One thing I've encountered is I was at the mall one time and I saw a T-shirt for believers that said, "Open hearts, closed minds." And apparently they were proud of the fact that they are closed-minded. So I didn't think that was actually very intellectually honest, or that's not something that I would prefer to be.
Yeah.
And another T-shirt, one that I actually wore growing up when I was in the 5th grade, back when I was a Christian, said on the front, "God said it, I believe it, that settles it." And on the back it said, "That settles it," as if that's the end of the argument. You know, that's what you believe, so that's the end of that.
People get so wrapped up in the weird bureaucracy of mankind needing Jesus' blood sacrifice, for Christians anyway, needing Jesus' blood sacrifice to buy them out of sin, things like that. So God's adhering to these weird rules, but he won't adhere to the very simple rules of debate and actually proving a point or forming an argument. Like, we're not supposed to question these things that he said. You know, why is the Bible? Why are we not allowed to criticize or hold it to a standard or have expectations for it?
And another thing is that when it comes to the justice system in the Bible and in Christianity, it doesn't make any sense, because technically you could commit rape, murder, and theft and then be forgiven for it and still go to heaven. However, if you've lived a virtuous life, and like Warren Buffett and Bill Gates are the two biggest philanthropists who have ever lived, but since both of them are atheists, according to the Bible, they're going to hell, and that's not just. That doesn't even make any sense, you know.
So that's a good way to avoid becoming an atheist, is to remember that God sees everything and knows everything, and he knows what you're thinking.
Yep.
So don't forget it.
Exactly.
What about number 6?
Okay. Number 6 is always remember that the only reason people become atheists is because they want to sin. I mean, it's not like when you become a Christian, you are automatically promised a reward up front for being credulous when you pray the salvation prayer, and as a result are basically given carte blanche to do whatever you please, because you'll be forgiven for nearly everything and anything, including, but not limited to, murder, rape, and theft, because that'd just be crazy. One of the things that I came across in doing research to back up these points is a article that was written on Atheist by a blogger called Barrier Breaker, and the title of the article is "The Critique of the Christian Moral System. If all I wanted to do was sin, I'd sin and ask forgiveness." So essentially the author of the article is saying that you are more likely to do bad things if you're a Christian rather than if you're an atheist, because if you're a Christian and do something bad, you can just ask for forgiveness and your slate will be wiped clean. So you'll essentially be forgiven by the most authoritative and powerful force in the universe, according to the Bible. And it goes as follows. If all I wanted to do is sin, I'd just claim the title of Christian and do it. I mean, atheists are among the most hated groups where I live in the United States. So if I wanted to sin, I wouldn't be an atheist. I'd be a Christian so I could still get all the respect a Christian gets, and then I'd sin and praise God for forgiving me. Because here's the deal. In your system, even if I was a serial killer, if I genuinely asked forgiveness at any point, God would forgive me. We atheists don't have that. When we do something that hurts somebody else, we can't go to a non-existent God and ask for forgiveness and feel better about it. No, there's no God. The primary offense wasn't to God. It was to that person, and we have to make amends with that person. And there are absolutely no takebacks guaranteed by imaginary friends. So in that way, being atheist is harder than being a Christian, who can just go up to God and ask for forgiveness.
Yeah, that's an important point. You got to live with yourself, and especially when you believe you've got one life and this is it, and all you have is your word, and you've got to lay down at night and go to sleep and feel good about it, or at least I'd like to. I think that most people would. We've got another caller on the line. Maybe We'll find out if he wants to talk about this point or something else we've already brought up. Let's go ahead and take the call. Thank you for calling Freethought Forum. Could you state your name, please?
My name's Al.
Hey, Al. Thanks for calling in. What are you calling about?
How to avoid becoming an atheist.
Calling in about how to avoid becoming an atheist.
This is a satirical article. Yes, sir.
This is a what?
Satirical article. Do you know what satire means?
Yeah, it's a comedy.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it means, yes.
Just making a joke out of atheists.
No, we're making a joke out of Christians.
Oh,
by
okay, so
saying-
let's start there. You're making a joke out of Christians, and you're making jokes about the Bible, and you're making jokes about Jesus, and you're going to die and go to hell.
Do you think I deserve to go to hell?
No, that's what God says.
So essentially you worship somebody who thinks that I deserve to go to hell.
God says you will go to hell if you're not born again.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I've been born again.
It makes sense because you've been born again. That's what you're saying.
Of course. That's the truth.
Do you think you deserve to be crucified like Jesus was crucified?
That doesn't even fit into this equation. I don't know why you're asking
No,
that question.
I'm asking it because I'm interested in learning your viewpoint. What Christianity has convinced you that is true? Do you think you deserve to be crucified?
Bible convinces me that it's true. If you read the King James Bible, 788,258 words, you'll find out that Jesus Christ, God himself, became a man, died on the cross for your sins so that you wouldn't die and go to hell if you would receive him as your personal Savior. But if you reject him as your Savior, you will die and go to hell. It's that simple. If there was no hell, Jesus would have never had to die on the cross.
Well, the whole point of the show is not just to make fun of things and laugh at Christians or atheists. The whole point is to ask questions, and so it's fair to us to ask a question about, like, why is that even necessary, or did that even happen, or did God really inspire this book? Did God really write this book?
Inspired. Every word.
How do you know that?
Theonostos means God breathed. That's in the Greek. The Greek manuscripts, it says all Scripture is theonostos, God breathed, by God. Every word, the 41 different men in the course of 1,500 years, to put a Bible together called the King James Bible to tell you who you are, why you're on earth, how you can stop from going to hell, and how you can go to heaven by trusting his Son who died on the cross for your sins.
Well, what about the books that didn't make it into the canon? Were those not inspired by God, or were they? And they just...
They were rejected by the early church fathers who went through the documents. They were not inspired, no.
Well, I don't trust those guys. I don't know who they were or how they decided this.
You don't trust anybody. You need to trust Christ or you'll go to hell.
Do you have a personal relationship with Jesus?
Oh, yes.
How does that work?
Well, there was a time when I didn't because I was a Catholic for 28 years. I was going to be a priest. Then I turned into a criminal after that. It was about 27 years old, and I was in prison, out of prison, in prison, out of prison, in prison. I was buying marijuana by the key. I was buying all kinds of drugs. I was shooting people. I was carrying a gun.
You've shot people?
Picking a straight razor, and I cut some people up, and I was put in jail. And I had all kinds of. I got a rap sheet. I mean, it's all black and white. I mean, it's in the newspaper. I got all the newspaper clippings, and nobody could straighten me out. Nothing could straighten me out.
Okay.
My father said he didn't know what in the world was wrong with me. I couldn't stop fighting and hitting people and hurting people, knifing people and shooting people. There was something wrong with me. One day, a preacher, a Baptist preacher, was over my house. I came home from work. I was running a construction company at the time.
You didn't shoot him or stab him?
No, I used to come in the house, and when there was a guy or two guys sitting at the table with my wife, I'd throw them out of the house. But this time, there was two guys, and I said, you know what, I'm going to make a fool out of these guys. That's what I said. But they asked me if I would just sit down and listen and answer a few questions. I said, sure. So I sat down, and they said, Al, do you believe in Jesus Christ? I said, yes. Have you ever received Christ? I said, yes. They said, when did you do it? I said, when I take communion on Sunday morning.
Oh, so you believed in Jesus at this point, but you're still cutting people, stabbing people?
No, yeah, right, because it's a head knowledge. It's a historical fact. If you don't believe Jesus died on the cross, you're an idiot.
Do you have conversations with Jesus?
No, I'm saying to you, if you don't believe that Jesus died, buried, and rose again, you're an idiot. It's history. It's like saying I don't believe in Abraham Lincoln.
You believe that somebody can be dead for 3 days and come back?
He did.
Well,
how is that possible?
He did. And for 40 days after he came out of that tomb, he walked among the people, and he showed himself to 500 people at one time in the book of Acts.
We know the story. Now, John...
You know the story. Well, it's a true story.
John's an atheist. I'm an atheist. Why do you think, wrapping this around to the topic of the show, why do you think we want to be atheists? Would you like to hazard a guess?
You want God in your life because you don't want to do right. You want to do wrong. You want to sin all you want and be your own person, and you're so full of pride that you can't get to Christ.
This is the word I was looking for, prideful.
You're so proudful. You're so proud of yourselves, of your thinking, the way you think, but your thinking is all backwards.
Do you have conversations with Jesus, and if so, what does he tell you?
I pray to him, and he talks to me when I read the Word of God.
Does he talk to you when you don't read the Word of God? Does he give you advice? Has he ever told you anything you don't know?
Not personally. In the spirit he does.
So how does that work exactly?
Well, like if I want to go buy a car or something like that and don't know if I really can afford it or not, I might pray and ask God if I should or I shouldn't.
So God tells you whether or not you can afford things?
No, in a certain way, through the Spirit, and I can't really explain how it happens because it's spiritual, and you being a trichotomy, you're a spirit, soul, and body, and through the Spirit, God speaks to me, and it would encourage me to do one thing or the other, and that's the way I would go. And if I did the other, if I did opposite of what he encouraged me to do, I would find out I made a big mistake.
How would you find out?
That I bought a bum car.
So every car that's ever stopped running is evidence that somebody did something that they bought a car that God didn't want them to?
Now, why are you saying that? Why are you saying that? You see, you're trying to make a joke out of this whole. This is a serious conversation.
It's a serious question.
Okay, both of you guys are going to live forever. You will never die. The flesh dies and goes in the ground, but your spirit and soul lives forever with a new body for the whole eternal life. Life never ends for you two guys, just like it never ends for me. Only I'm going to heaven and you're going to hell. Now, if I'm wrong, I've lived a pretty good life, and he's changed my life around. I've started 3 churches, and I've pastored those 3 churches. He's changed my entire life around. But if you guys are wrong...
That's Pascal's wager. You're essentially saying...
I've lived a pretty good life.
You're saying you believe what you believe because it's safer.
You're wrong. You're going to hell.
Thank you, Al, for calling in. We're going to let you go for right now. We want to help everyone that doesn't want to go to hell and rather go to heaven. So all you need to do is follow these remaining 5 ways to avoid becoming an atheist, and you'll be just fine, and you won't go to hell with me and John. You'll be all right.
Do me go ahead and wrap these up, or what?
Let's move on to number 5. I think we can get through the rest of them. Yeah.
Okay. All right, number 5. Don't believe the lies of evolution. That's evolution with an E-V-I-L-U-T-I-O-N. Don't believe the lies of evolution. If we came from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? Checkmate, atheist.
Right, I hear the example all the time that you can't, we'll go back to Al's example of a car. You can't shake around pieces of a car, all broken up in a box somewhere in some shipping container and open the thing up and find a car. So that must mean that evolution is just impossible, right? That everything had to be created specifically according to its kind by the all-powerful creator. So a great way to not become an atheist is to learn more about what evolution actually is, and just to dismiss it up front on the shallow basis of, oh, it's still a theory, it's not even a fact, or there are still monkeys that we haven't grown an extra hand or an extra leg for humans to improve or become more efficient. So,
and another thing people say all the time, which I hear from people who don't believe that evolution is true, is evolution is just a theory. And my response to that is, I don't think you realize what that word means. Theory doesn't mean it's something that may be true. It means it's something that has been established. And in the scientific community, and the word theory is a scientific term. We also have the theory. We also have germ theory. Germs exist. We also have atomic theory. Atoms exist, and we also have the theory of gravity, and gravity exists. The same thing with evolution. The theory of evolution is something that has been proven, and that's what the word theory means.
but if you like to continue dismissing it, just avoid learning more about it, and you'll be safe. We got another caller on the line. This is a very active show today. We appreciate it. So, thank you for calling Freethought Forum. You're on the air. What's your name?
George,
George. Thank you for calling, George. Where are you from?
Knoxville.
George in Knoxville. Awesome. What are you calling in about?
Well, I wanted to say that I really like your show.
Thank you.
I like this approach that you're using. I also wanted to make a comment that it always strikes me as, well, funny is not quite the word, when people call in and say with, I would say, glee, that you're going to hell.
Makes you feel good, doesn't it?
There are people who do slaughter the body with knives and guns and so on, and I believe there are people who slaughter our minds, and I would say let's say spirit, though I'm not quite sure what that word is, by abusing other people by telling them about hell. And I have to just say that one of my missions in life is just to convince one other person that teaching children and adults about hell and then sending them there mentally is cruel, and it's a psychological abuse. And that kind of abuse that often comes from fundamentalist Christians really describes what they are all about. They are about pride, as you discussed, but they are about hate. And they want to put themselves on the side of God and anyone who disagrees with them on the side of their fictional devil. So we hear those arguments all the time, and I'll shut up. Just wanted to support you on what you're doing. I really like this approach. And I think if you'll let me just end with one quote you probably know very well from Thomas Paine. To argue with a person who has renounced the use of reason is like administering medicine to the dead. And thank you very much.
Thank you for calling.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate the show, and I appreciate your work.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Keep watching. We hope you'll call back on another show. I've talked to George before, so it's a great. Hopefully, we never want to give up on people who say they still believe in God, or like Al, who think we're still going to hell. Maybe one day, just the right question, we'll just we'll have them examine their belief, or what they state out loud, or what they just said, or just a little more closely, and they'll just make sure that they really believe in it, that it stands up to scrutiny, and that it can stand the test of critical thinking. Because as we've been learning, the more you dig deep into something and think about it, That's a bad way to keep your faith, is to examine it closely. So let's move on to number 4. I think we can get to these by the end of the show.
All right, I'll go ahead and read 4 through 1. We have about 4 minutes left. I'll go ahead and read the rest of these, and we can talk about them all together before the end of the show. Number 4, top 10 ways to avoid becoming an atheist. Avoid the internet, because the internet is where religion goes to die. Never read the Bible in its entirety. You successfully managed to avoid all the screwed up verses by cherry picking in Sunday school. Why start now? Stay away from people who encourage you to think for yourself. Judas thought for himself, and he ended up getting Jesus killed. Well, technically, Jesus was meant to die for your sins, and if Judas hadn't led the Romans to Jesus, prophecy wouldn't have been fulfilled, and then God couldn't forgive you, and we'd all be sacrificing goats when we did something bad. But it's best not to think about that. Never mind, I said.
Well,
and lastly, but certainly not least, actually most important of all, if you see Christopher Hitchens' book, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything, on a bookshelf at Barnes & Noble, leave it there. Curiosity killed the cat. But before that cat died, that cat became an atheist and is now burning in hell.
John, we've got another caller.
Okay.
Probably the last caller of the show.
Okay.
Covered a lot of topics there, so I'm wondering what they'd like to talk about. Thank you for calling Freethought Forum, caller. You're on the air. What's your name?
My name is Patricia Jones.
Patricia?
Yes.
Thank you for calling. Where are you from?
Oh, I live in Hillham, Tennessee.
All right. Another Tennessee caller. What are you calling
yes.
about?
Anyway, I just have a particular thought. I would just put it out there.
Please do.
Okay. Anyway, I'm an atheist, and what I find particularly disturbing about the Christian afterlife is that the notion that belief is the ticket for admission to heaven. All other manner of deceitful, hateful, hurtful, cruel behavior is dismissed by this one idea. The Christian heaven I think would be populated with the worst possible sort, while the opposite, hell, is reserved for non-believers, regardless of what their conduct is. And I think this is a very strange concept for Christians to find comfort in.
Right. Yeah, I would agree. I think that's when I was talking my way out of faith and finding atheism. I thought that it was kind of scary at first, and you actually, when you still kind of believe but are questioning, you start thinking, or at least I did, that I was not going to receive the reward, but I was going to receive the punishment. But then the more I was kind of okay with that, I felt like I was in better company. I'm like, at least I'm with people who are trying to be honest with themselves and do the right thing, even if that means God thinks that you aren't. And then eventually, you don't worry so much about managing.
That's true. Thank you for calling. We need to go ahead and wrap up the show. But
thank you, Patricia.
We appreciate you calling.
Okay. Thank you for taking my call.
Thank
you. It's time to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I am John Webster.
And I'm Mark Hamilton. Please send us feedback. Leave voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email at us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see this show on Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern time on Knoxville Station and at 2200 Greenwich Mean Time at ctvknox.org.
The opinions expressed on this show are of the hosts and guests and not any official opinion of the Ask or RET. We'd like to thank Sam for technical support and the staff at CTV Knox, and to all of our viewers and callers.
Nuns, those who identify with no religion, are the fastest growing religious group in America. Right here in East Tennessee, the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee are places you can find fellowship and fun. Remember, you can meet us after this at Barley's in Knoxville.
I think the most important point is if you're questioning, if you're skeptical, we want you to know that you're not alone. There's people right here in town, in East Tennessee, who are questioning and might believe the same thing that you do. So please, we hope you come see us sometime.
You're not alone.